All right. So, good morning, Jodi. How are you today?
Oh, I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me. And I am so excited to get into your story because wow, you're one of the you're one of the miracles I want to say for
Yeah.
what you have gone through. So, can you just kind of we'll start with just a little bit about your excuse me about your background and your diagnosis, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Okay. So my husband and I had been married for about 3 years. We got married in 1998. And so it was 2001, and we were at the point in our lives thinking, oh, I think it's about time to start our family. All of our friends were having children and all that. And it was June of 2001, and I started getting these headaches. I started getting really bad migraine type headaches, and I'd had migraines for 20 years at that point. And these were just a little bit different. We had gone on a couples retreat with our church, and there was no reason for me to be stressed out and get migraines. And I said, this is weird. I've never had this visual aura before. And then I proceeded to have four of those episodes within a 24-hour period. And so I went to the doctor right away, and he said, well, I want to put you on a beta blocker. And I said, well, I don't want that. I want to know what's going on, and I want an MRI. And he said, well, Jodi, migraines don't show up in MRIs. I said, yeah, but brain tumors do. And I think he was taken back. He was like, yeah, I don't think you have a brain tumor. And I said, well, how do you know unless you do an MRI? And so that's kind of how it all started. So I think I said that my husband and I had been married for 3 years at that point. I grew up in rural South Dakota, and he was in the Air Force. And so we had moved around a little bit at that point. And we just, that's when life changed as we knew it, pretty much. So as far as from that, it turns out about a week later, well, a couple weeks later, after I'd had multiple episodes, um, it turns out, well, I'll get to that in a second. So I'd had multiple episodes, and I talked to him multiple times, and he said, okay, I'm going to send you in for an MRI. And he sent me in, and I had a brain tumor. Of course, he didn't know that's what it was at first. And so he said, well, we need to send you to a neurosurgeon. Sorry about that. A neurosurgeon, and then proceed from there. So that's what we did. And, it was interesting when I got that phone call. It was I remember it was June 20th of 2001. And we were sitting around our table with some friends having dessert. We were having some pie, and the phone call came. And right away, we had community. We had people around us, which was so amazing. And so, we prayed, and we just looked for those next steps. And so then I had my surgery. I had my MRI on June 20th, and it was June 29th when I had my surgery. And I'm leaving some
Wow.
details out, but it happened super fast.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so that's kind of how it all started. And then the pathology revealed that it was a glioblastoma, which mine was a rare variant of a glioblastoma. It had skin cells in it. So right away, they thought I had cancer elsewhere in my body because of the skin cells that came on the pathology. That they do a frozen section
Mhm.
right away. So they did a frozen section, and it showed it had skin cells. So then they had to do lots of other tests to figure out what kind of, why are there skin cells in this brain tumor? And it's just on a rare variant. And so over the years, we've learned more about that. But at the beginning, it was pretty devastating because I thought for sure I had cancer somewhere else in my body. And that then when the diagnosis came back, it was even more devastating because only about 1% survive the kind of cancer, glioblastoma. So it was pretty grim from the very beginning. And all we could do is lean on the Lord, because we're the life that we were living changed dramatically just like that. And we didn't know what to do. And so we had to pray. We did a lot of prayer. Just trying to figure out what the next steps are, because when you don't know what to do, go into your knees in prayer, and he directed our steps each step of the way. So that's kind of the beginning.
Like I said, I mean, it's truly a miracle. Here you are 20 plus years later with a cancer that had a 1 to 2% survival rate.
Yeah.
So, wow. You know, I guess, how did you feel when your doctor said, oh, you know, migraines won't show up on an MRI? Like, was there just this kind of intuition that you knew that something was seriously wrong, or like how did you navigate through all of that? When did you think, I need to find another doctor? Did you think, I just need to continue to hound him until he does what I say?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
how did you get through all of that?
Well, up to that point in my life, I never went to the doctor. I never had any problems. I was healthy, other than the migraines that I'd gotten, for years. And they were usually every few months. They weren't very often. And so at first I thought, well, who is this guy? Right. But then I just was persistent, and I guess that going back, I'm a dental hygienist, and so I had taken pathology classes in college, but not in-depth pathology. But what I did know is that, for example, if you have melanoma, well, a lot of us have moles on our body, and we don't need to get too concerned unless it starts changing. And so I did a paper on that in college. And so in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, but my migraines have always been this, but now they're this. So in my mind, it was like, okay, things are changing. I need to pursue something. And why it even popped into my mind that I might have a brain tumor, I have no idea, other than maybe the Holy Spirit was kind of saying, hey, you need to pursue this a little bit more. Because a couple years prior to that, my mom, I was having a lot of migraines during the summer, and it was a hot summer, and she said, maybe you should do more tests. And I was like, Mom, I'm the textbook migraine sufferer. I've had all those symptoms. I wasn't worried about it, but I think that my mom's voice was probably in the back of my mind as well.
Wow. So you said that you had surgery, and then they did the pathology, and then it came back. And now, did you do like the traditional treatments, for all of
Well,
that, and kind of what did that entail?
right. So I was adamant. I did not want to do chemotherapy. I knew that chemotherapy, everybody I knew who had done chemotherapy had shriveled up, became nothing, and then passed away. And I thought, I don't want that. I want life. I want to be able to enjoy life. So we looked at we didn't look too deeply into the alternative treatments, but we did kind of explore that a little bit, because I said, okay, well, because they presented me with, we should do radiation therapy and chemotherapy. And I said, well, I'll do the radiation therapy, but I'm kind of on the fence on the chemotherapy part. And again, okay, we have to pray before we make a decision. So we did. And it was clear to both my husband and I that I was supposed to do chemotherapy. And I kind of went into it a little bit kicking and screaming, but at the same time, knowing that God had directed us in that. And it's like, okay, I got to do it. Here we go. And, so I did radiation and chemotherapy. I started simultaneously. There was some new study at that time saying, oh, if you do them simultaneously, you might have better results. Okay. And it's scientific, there's a lot of guessing
Right.
with that. And so I was like, okay. So we did that. But again, the Lord directed us in that. And it was 3 days of chemotherapy simultaneous with my 7 weeks of, no, I did 3 days of chemotherapy with radiation therapy. Then I finished out my 7 weeks, but it was on the third day, actually, my husband had been on the computer nonstop, looking at different things. I, on the other hand, was exhausted and tired and trying to recover from brain surgery. So I just said, okay, you do the research. I'm going to go to sleep. So
Good for
that's kind of
you.
what I did.
Good for you.
And so he was burning the midnight oil, trying to figure out different things, and found out about some at Duke University. They were trying to develop, or it was in the clinical trial stage of developing a vaccine for brain cancer. And my husband was like, interesting. What is this about? So he just got in there and just dug a little deeper. And actually, it wasn't too deep, but he saw the phone number of or the email address of the head of the neuro-oncology department. So he just fired him an email, and
I love that.
why not, right?
Right.
And my wife is 27 years old. I'm not ready for her to die, basically. And then Dr. Friedman called like he said, I want your phone number. He responded within the hour, I think.
Wow.
And then he called us the third day of my chemotherapy. He called that morning and he basically was like, hey, you're getting standard pedestrian treatment. I'm like, what's that? He said, you're getting what anybody off the street would get. But if you want to try different things, maybe you should come and see us. So we did. We went out to Duke University in October and met him for the first time. And everything that he was saying made sense. And we just had a lot of peace about it. So we decided to go with their treatment protocol. And then he sent us back to Colorado. And then we just had to find somebody who was willing to work with him. So that's kind of how it all started. Then I did about a year and a half's worth of chemo. And
Wow.
yeah, it was rough. But the cool thing about that, so I did three different, so I'd done one type of chemotherapy, and I knew nothing about chemotherapy at that point. I thought it was just straight across the board, everybody got the same thing. Well, no, for brain cancer, there's certain drugs that there's this thing called a blood-brain barrier. This is probably way more information than you want to know, but certain drugs won't pass that blood-brain barrier. So then for brain tumors, they have to do specific types of chemo that cross the blood-brain barrier. And so I ended up doing 4 types of chemo. Not at the same time, but like simultaneous, or not simultaneously, but in succession of one another. So
And I mean, the main thing, I guess, to note is that you felt very at peace doing all of this. Like,
I did.
God was guiding your steps and you were doing the right thing for you. And
Yeah.
that, there was no trepidation because you knew that this was what was necessary. And that's
Right.
where you did.
And at the same time, I didn't think I'd see my next birthday. It was kind of the juxtaposition of both of those emotions. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to fight, but I might not survive. And just that heavy, whew, it was pretty intense.
And so you've said several times that you leaned on prayer and you leaned on God, and I would imagine that He and your faith are really what helped you to get through all of this, and again to
Yeah.
be in many ways at peace with all the decisions that you were making,
Hmm.
which is
I
which
have a
is
quick question. Is
fantastic.
the top of my head, is that better? Or I look at this Can you see me okay?
Yeah, I can see you fine. Yep,
Sorry.
everything is
I just
perfect.
looked up at
Nope,
my little face and just wanted to make sure. So
no,
sorry
no
about the
worries. Everything is fine. Yes. All right. So other than God, I mean, did you have family, friends, this like what was your support structure, through
Right.
all of this?
Yeah, that was really important. Because there are support groups and there are lots of people, but I personally didn't join a support group, a brain tumor support group, because I did have my brothers and sisters in Christ praying all the time. I had family, we're very close to our families. And I had a lot of peace about that because we had a very tight knit community, with our small group at church and with my husband's family we lived about an hour away. I'm from South Dakota. My family doesn't live close to us. We live in Colorado, and um, that was all happening in Colorado too. But they made the trek several times down here to support us too. So, we did have a lot of support. And so I never joined a support group until probably 5 or 6 years ago,
Wow.
longer than that, about 7 years ago. I joined a Facebook online glioblastoma support group because I thought, it's important that you have people to encourage you. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to be doing that for other people. So, that was one of the first, when we went to Duke University, I just said, I just want to know somebody who's surviving this because the statistics were really grim. And I said, I just want to know someone. And my doctor said, well, actually, there's this guy that we did a 60 Minutes interview, and his name is David Bailey. And I said, I want to meet him. I want to meet he was a music artist at the time, and he was having a concert here in Denver. So we drove from Colorado Springs up to Denver, 2 hours ish, just to meet him. And that
Wow.
was really encouraging. Yeah. And so at that time he was like I said, 6 year survivor. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Nobody survives that long. And now I get to be that person for a lot of people. I get to be that support, whether it's a friend of a friend or somebody just got my contact from a doctor or something like that. Um, People contact me a lot about, hey, I was diagnosed with this brain cancer and I don't know what the next steps are. Do you have any advice or, whatever? So it is important that you have some kind of connection. As you well know, it's important.
Well, I love that you chose to do that, because it is true. Like when you're going through this, which is one of the reasons for this podcast in general, is that
Right.
you want to know that somebody else gets you, that somebody else knows
Yep.
what you're going through. And for you to actually seek out a way to do that and to give back to others through this, Facebook support group. I think that's my son, like,
Is it yours?
yeah.
Okay. I was trying to.
I mean, I think that that is just so absolutely amazing that you do that for other people. And I'm sure there's so many people out there who you have helped, especially with a cancer like yours that has such a grim,
Right.
survival rate that I'm sure people want to talk to you all the time.
And but it's really neat because God doesn't give me more than I can handle, which I just love. I would say about every month, every I hear from one or two people, or maybe somebody else checks back in with me or, whatever. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it is very important.
Now, did you make any kind of lifestyle changes or, things to your diet or your mindfulness or something to kind of help prevent, recurrence or the
Right.
cancer coming back?
Yeah. I did. At the time were connected with a nutritionist, and that nutritionist got me on some glyconutritional supplements and changed a lot of my diet, actually, pretty much no carbs or very few. And so, for example, I would eat Ezekiel bread or, things, the sprouted grain type of stuff, and no white sugar, no white sugar, pretty much no sugar
Yeah.
at all. And except the stuff you would get from fruits and vegetables and stuff. And so, really, really drastically cut that kind of stuff out of my diet. And then, but I didn't cut out meat, the meat source. I have to throw this in. My dad is a rancher in South Dakota. And I said, well, if I stop eating meat, I'm going to be disowned, right?
Oh,
Disowned from the family. And so, I did eat some meat, but lean meat, of course. And, you know, I did a Hallelujah Acres diet. Part of it, what that is it's like a lot of raw vegetables, recipes made with that. So I did make quite a few drastic changes. In fact, I remember when we lived in Colorado Springs for 5 years after I was diagnosed. Then we moved to Virginia, and we were there for 5 years, with him being in the Air Force. And I hadn't had pizza in a long, long time because I wasn't having carbs. And so because I was juicing every day, I was able to make a pizza crust out of the pulp from the organic vegetables I was juicing. And I made a
really?
kind of a crust, and I made this. Yeah. So my husband was so supportive, and I said, "Isn't this good?" And he's like, "Mm-hmm." He was like, "Sure, it's great."
But when you can't have pizza and you can have something even moderately close, yes,
I
it
know.
is
And
good.
he was so supportive, and he ate it anyway.
That's awesome. So, and you mentioned again, prayer is huge for you. Any other kind of mindfulness, stress management, those kinds of really self-care things that you took on or that you noticed you did not have before?
Um, Exercise was a big thing, at least getting out and walking. Sometimes that's all I could do,
Right.
is I could go for a walk. And we had a dog, so we went for lots of walks. And so I did that. And as far as I do yoga now, but I didn't do it back then, so really the biggest thing is staying in the word of God, and being plugged in that way. And then I did exercise, but as far as um, the mindfulness aspect, not so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, prayer counts as mindfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's just,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so now you're 20 some years out, 23 years out almost. Um,
Yep.
and I know some about brain cancer. I don't know everything about brain cancer. Is there like, are you done forever? Like, or is there always that possibility that it will come back?
There is always a possibility. I know long-term survivors. In fact, well, every case is different. And that was one of the things that an oncologist told me before we went to Duke. We saw someone here in Denver, and she said, every case is different. And I didn't like to hear that necessarily, because I really wanted to know facts. I wanted to know how long I was going to survive. Well, nobody knows. Nobody knows the number of their days. Anyway, even if you're not sick, you don't know. And the thing is, every case is different. And so many people have recurrences within a year
Mhm.
or within a few years. And so, just like with most cancers, from what I know, is you hit that 5 year mark, and that's a big deal, right? That's huge. For me, I hit my 5 year mark, and I thought, oh, my doctor's going to say I can go ahead and start my family. No, he said, we need you to wait a little longer. So it was finally at 7 years. He said, okay, your brain is beautiful. Everything looks good. I think that, are you ready to start your family? And
Mhm.
that was huge. And so, but even with that, like at that point, I was still getting MRIs every 4 months. And then I had to go 9 months without an MRI, and that was a little bit scary. And so, yeah, so they monitored me as closely as they could, but then while I was pregnant, they don't do MRIs while you're pregnant with contrast because they know that gadolinium can affect the fetus. So they don't do it. So that was kind of a scary time. But I had two children, which is a miracle, another miracle, right? Two miracles beyond what I'd already experienced. And so I had um, Abigail, and yeah. So Abigail and Bethany are my daughters.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, because I
Yeah.
did hear that actually being pregnant can, cause it to come
Yep.
back. So I'm sure that that was a very and
Yeah.
prayerful time for you.
Yeah. It was a scary time. On one hand, I mean, you have once again that collision of emotions because you have this, you're expecting a baby, which we didn't think we'd even be able to have because I had so much chemotherapy. And they yeah, chemotherapy can affect the egg production and all that. So I didn't think I'd be able to conceive my own children. I thought we'd probably adopt, and lo and behold, we had two blessings. So
Which is fantastic. And
yeah.
they're teenagers now, correct?
One is 15 and the other is 12. I shouldn't say 15. She will be 15 in 4 days.
Well, probably by the time this airs, she will be 15. Yeah.
Yes, she will be 15 by then.
All right. So you talk to a lot of people and you help and inspire a lot of people. And this is something that I got a lot. So what would you say would be one thing that you or no one should say to someone who has been diagnosed with cancer if they come and they tell you?
Um,
Like, what did you not want to
I
hear?
I didn't want to hear. One doctor was frustrated that I went to Duke University, and he said, um, "I think it's reprehensible that you went to see this doctor is telling you you're going to beat this thing." That is a pretty horrible thing to say to a cancer patient. Then there was another situation where um, we had insurance issues with going to Duke because they were saying we needed to stay in Colorado because that's what the insurance will cover. And I said, yeah, but my doctors are in North Carolina. And so my case manager, who was supposed to be on my side, said, well, it's waste, fraud, and abuse for you to be going to Duke. So those types of things. I mean, those are two very wrong things to say to a patient. You don't say those types of things. You encourage as much as you can. So those were two kind of awful things. But
Wow.
then sometimes people don't know what to say. They don't, and as you experience too, it's like they don't know what to say, and then they say something and they wish that they hadn't said it. You can just tell by the look on their face, So
Yes.
I think it's an awkward situation for people, and I've been in those awkward situations with other situations with people. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your
Yeah.
question or not.
No, and I think just,
Okay.
being authentic and maybe
Hmm.
saying like, I don't really know what to say,
Yeah.
because different people want to hear different things. Like when I was going through it, I didn't want people to say, I'm sorry when I told
Right.
them because
Right.
it changed my life and
Right.
it's just something that happened and people, that's the first thing that people want to say is I'm sorry. And
Right.
I would have to say I'm not. I mean, it happened and
Yeah.
I'm making the best of it
Yep.
and stuff. So
Yeah.
I always like to ask that kind of, what don't you say? Because a lot of people
Right.
don't know what to say. And by knowing what not to say, that can kind of help
Right.
with all of
I
that.
had one, exactly. And so I had one situation where a friend was like, um, I asked how he was doing, because I think the biggest thing when you're in the midst of it and everybody's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." They just only want to hear what's going on in my life. And I said, "No, I want to know what's going on in your life. How's your life?" And this friend said, "Well, my daughter decided she doesn't want to follow Jesus anymore, but it's nothing like what you're going through." And I said, actually, I know where where I stand with my relationship with Jesus, with God. And so I said, what's more devastating is that she is making that choice. What I'm doing, what I'm going through is nothing compared to what she's going through, because if I die today, I know I'm going to be in heaven. Whereas if she is choosing to walk away from the Lord, that's a bigger deal. And so I don't know. I think everybody just assumes that you're going through it, and they compare what they're going through as something. And I'm like, no, we've all got stuff. We've all got things that we're dealing with. And I want people to be real and share what's going on in their lives, and not just, oh, we won't talk about my life. Let's talk about yours.
Because sometimes you want to
And
hear
so,
other people's problems because you don't want to
yeah.
talk about yourself and everything that you're going through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the time. And so then it was nice to finally hit that 5-year mark, and people didn't, I was like, and then we moved at that same time. And so we moved to Virginia, and I thought, these people don't even need to know that I had brain cancer, but it was such part of my life. And it just came out like, oh, whoops, I just mentioned that I'd had, oh, you did? But it was it was a journey and a transition. And, for a long time, I didn't really want to talk about it. But then I understood what God's plan and purpose for my life is. So anyway, now I talk about it all the time.
Well, we have just a couple minutes left, and I really
Yeah,
didn't want to get done with this without mentioning you wrote a children's book, and
right.
it's called Boo Bear's Big Day, a hope-filled story about brain cancer. And can you just kind of, oh, you have the book, yay.
I have the book right here.
And I'm gonna put the link in the show notes that you can go to Amazon
Okay.
or wherever you get books and order it. But can you just kind of, talk real quick just a little bit about the story and, why you wrote it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a big piece of my life. A few years ago, or people had said, you should write a book. And I thought, my husband and I thought, well, who would buy our book? We're not famous. Nobody cares about our cancer or, whatever. And just that, well, what would we write our book about? We could chronicle the entire story. But so we were at a breakout session, a we were at a conference, and they were doing a breakout session about writing a book. We thought, oh, let's go to that and see what they have to say. And so we went, and after the session was over, we learned a lot about writing a book, but we were like, okay, now what, And this person turned to me and said, "What's your book going to be about?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." And he goes, "Well, I have time. Tell me your story. Tell me what you're thinking." And so I told him, and he said, "You should write a children's book." And I was like, probably not, but thanks for the idea. And fast forward a few months, I was connected with a guy who had recently been diagnosed, and I was talking to him on the phone, and he said I asked him if he was married and had kids, and he said, "Yes, I'm married. My children are 1, 3, and 5-ish. I don't remember the exact ages." But I said, "Oh, how in the world are you going to talk to your kids about this?" And he said, "I have no idea." And it was almost like the Holy Spirit tapped on my shoulder and said, "That book has to be a children's book." And I was like, "Oh, maybe there is a need." And so then I looked into it. A friend of mine was working at St. Jude Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. And so I had her look and see if they had such a book. And she said there wasn't any. And I thought, well, maybe I will. Then I got And then my friend Tracy, who you know, Tracy, I
Mhm,
think she got us connected actually.
mhm.
And so I found I knew I needed a publisher, I needed an illustrator, all of that, and everything just kind of fell into place. So here we are.
I love
Five,
that. And
4.5 years later, I got the book written.
it's so wonderful to have that out in the world for
Yeah.
children
Yeah.
and for everybody. So again, I'm going to
And
link that in the show notes, so people
okay,
can buy it
that's
um,
great.
as well.
And if people want a signed copy, they can always get a hold of me
Okay.
somehow and I
All right.
can
I'll
get
I'll put your
some
contact
on hand.
information in there too. And
Yep. So
so if
local
people want to
people.
connect with you further, like how is
Mhm.
what's the best way to go about doing that?
Um, I will give you that information.
Okay.
And we can put that in the show notes as well.
Absolutely.
So I have like a website, but I'm not super active on it yet.
Okay.
But if people are, I can give that to you anyway, and I can train myself to get more active in there.
Okay.
But I do have a Facebook, um, uh, another Facebook page.
Okay.
It's a business one
Okay.
that would get you connected with that. So I
Okay,
can give
great.
all that information to you.
Absolutely. I would love that. All right. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much
great.
for joining us, Jodi. I really appreciate all your time today and all of that great information. And God bless you. And I'm so grateful that everything has
Thank
worked out
you.
fantastic for you. And hopefully it will continue to for the rest of your life.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
All right. Have a great rest of your
Yep.
day.
Thank you. You too.